Chat, that's right. No intro today. I want to get right into things. Hello, everyone. Um, I've been sent over the last couple of days, last week or so, this news about a train derailment in Ohio. And it's being sent to me because it's been compared in the media by people on social media to as America's Mini-Chernobyl. And in the pursuit of what I used to do as a career, which was science writing, I wanted to take the next hour or so, if it takes that long, to calmly, collectedly go through what we know, what this is, and what the future ramifications might be. Again, I'll say right at the top, this isn't a Chernobyl level event. So if you're very worried, if you live in the area, if you know people near the area, this is not that. But I'm taking this office hours to talk specifically about this one event because it touches on a lot of things that we can learn about from a scientific perspective. Contamination, what different chemicals do in different environments, concentrations, acute doses of chemicals. All of this is something we can learn from. So even if you're not from the United States, even if you don't know about Ohio or this topic isn't super interesting to you, I think we can still learn something about it, because in the last couple of weeks, it seems like there's been enough disasters and weird things happening that this is starting to coalesce into a sort of like very conspiracy-laden discussion with this and the balloons and all this stuff. People are getting very reactionary and conspiracy-oriented. So I just want to do my best to calmly and collectedly go through this step by step with you. And if you all agree to be cool about it and not be weird, I will try to go through everything that I know about the situation and everything I know about the science of the situation. What about aliens, Kyle? It's never aliens. Welcome, everybody, from the facility, all my members. You can always join on our Patreon if you want to have more access with me or more access to all of our videos, everything that we try to do out here in the world. But today is about public health education. Okay, so this is one of the disturbing images that you will see from Ohio. Now, this is definitely a scary cloud, right? Hi from North Olmsted, Ohio. Conspiracy basically means going against the state, says Gareth Logan. No, Gareth, conspiracy means believing things without proper evidence. Conspiratorial thinking, that everything doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, no matter what opinion you have, it should be informed by the evidence. So let's try to go through this, okay? So this is what you're seeing circulating on social media, an event like this, or an image like this, rather. This is a fire. Well, this is one of the fires from a train derailment that happened on February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio. Not many people live in East Palestine. It's a very small town, but this is a very large and ominous cloud, right? What actually happened was that it looked like the train itself, carrying 150 train cars, 20 of which were carrying hazardous materials. It looks like one of the axles on one of the trains got busted up and derailed. Now, we can talk about whether that had to do directly with negligence, lack of regulations, etc., etc. But that's what indeed happened. Axle came off, train comes off the rails. So 20 of these train cars were carrying hazardous materials. A fire broke out almost immediately. Some of them were carrying vinyl chloride, says Nico Master. We will get to that. Liz Calvert with the 10. I'm not going to be, I know I tend to get distracted by chat a lot when I do these things, but we're going to go through this pretty directly today. So I'm sorry if um, I don't get to everything. We want to do some good communication effort here. So the fire um, continued on for 2 days or 3 to 4 days, while the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, got on site. And what they started to do immediately was monitor air quality. Because with these chemicals, they get released, they're under pressure, they're liquid, which is why they can, explosively release themselves and or combust. And so they monitor air quality to see what the level of these chemicals is in the air. That indicates the ambient level of contamination. So this is an up-close image of some of the chemicals. Not all of it were aerosolized or just gas. Some of the chemicals leaching into the ground at the site. Now we know that some chemicals were leaching into nearby streams, and there have been reported fish deaths in the streams. What did happen, though, is that all downstream water treatment plants were identified, they set up dams, and they adjusted their treatment accordingly. Worst ecological disaster in U.S. history? No. No. Let's not be hyperbolic here. So, up close shot of the chemicals, some of the chemicals that went into the ground, into the air, and into the streams. And we will get to how that lingers in an environment from an environmental engineering perspective. How far is the affected area? Joshua will get to that. So, as the fire burned, as it was put out, the EPA and authorities on the ground decided to do a controlled burn of said chemicals. Now, I think this is one of the pain points for people. I think this is one of the pain points for people. Why burn a dangerous thing? And I think it's a pain point because we have a intuitive understanding that stuff burning is bad, right? If you've ever, one of your electronics ever set on fire, it smells funny, it's bad. That immediately knee-jerk reaction triggers us to think that it's bad. However, not burning it off could have been much worse, given that there could have been a large explosion, which is what the EPA is saying, a large explosion which would have distributed all of these chemicals much further in the area. And these chemicals are called volatiles, or VOCs, volatile organic chemicals. Now, while you burn them in a controlled manner is to change what the chemicals are. You know that you may not know, but if you've ever taken a chemistry class, when you burn hydrogen, you get carbon dioxide and water. It changes it. You don't have, if there's enough of each ingredient, and that's stoichiometry, chat, but if there's enough of each ingredient, you can change the chemical entirely. So burning off these volatile, potentially hazardous chemicals, actually one of the better options. And they also went in for the liquid chemicals with a vacuum truck and tried to suck up those as much as they could. It is similar to how dumps will handle the very potent greenhouse gas methane. So instead of letting methane directly into the air, they will burn it because the carbon dioxide that results from that is less potent of a greenhouse gas than the methane. So don't worry, everything is just fine. That's not what I said. That's not what I said. Look, chat, if we're going to have a nuanced discussion here, then let's have one of those. You won't find it on social media, okay? So let's have one of those. Let's be level-headed about this, okay? So, burning these chemicals in this controlled manner undoubtedly looks terrifying. It really does. It really does. It's really bad. It looks really bad. what is non-intuitive is that this was one of the better options than possibly letting an explosion happen. And we'll get to this a little bit later, but one of the things that made Chernobyl so terrible for the environment is that a massive explosion threw many, many tons of radioactive material into the surrounding environment. Vinny, we'll get to that. So this rising up into the air and going into the atmosphere, I know it looks scary, but it could have been worse. I'm not saying it's good. That's it. So this cloud, or these gases, or what was left after the burn off, was expected to move across an area about 10 miles. So a large area, comparatively not that big. If you're talking about, if you want to compare it to something like other disasters, it's a lot, but it's not as large as you might think. And I want to go back for a second. I forgot a little sciencey bit. Do you know why clouds look like this, chat? It is because, and this happens in nuclear explosions as well, that the constituents of the cloud will rise until the density of the air matches their own. And if they're not less dense or more dense, they're just as dense, it wouldn't rise or fall in the atmospheric column, would it? Think of it like water. Air is technically a fluid when you're talking about fluid dynamics. So at that point, same density, instead of rising or falling, it spreads out. And that's why clouds look like that. I know it looks like a scary mushroom cloud, but that is just an artifact of the density. Now, after this control burn happened, immediately, and this was since day one of the disaster, the EPA started moving around and sampling the air quality. Now, this is, again, the invisible nature of dangerous chemicals or radiation gets people really frightened. But if the only thing, if you want to trust anything, don't trust a person, don't trust the head of a company, don't trust a politician, just trust the equipment and the data. And that's it. So what the EPA goes around and does in a situation like this is have all of their team members with roaming air sensors and static air sensors. Now, static air sensors are good because you have a consistent source of data, and in one location you can compare it day to day to see how that location is changing, how wind direction is affecting that, etc., etc. These roaming ones can go into people's houses. And when you go into people's houses, what you're looking for is certain concentrations that are actionable. Now, this is, too, something that's hard for the public to grasp. Concentrations determine everything. And there are concentrations of even very dangerous things that are no longer dangerous. The public, the government has the reactionary idea that any concentration is bad. It's not true. This is what, for example, it made the cleanup of Fukushima Daiichi and the surrounding areas so darn difficult, is because of the government's incredibly stringent contamination concentrations, which were below ambient levels in some parts. They had to remove hundreds of thousands of tons of topsoil and material. It made it much harder. And so I say that to say, if you're concerned about something, you should be concerned about the concentration. And that's what these are looking for. If you have a decent contamination concentration level, it says, oh, this might start causing health effects. That's what you look for. If it's below that, you have confidence in your machine and studies that have been done on people that it's not likely to be harmful. Okay? Good. Now, this controlled burn and the aftermath got social media aflame. Forgive the pun. Which led to a lot of posts like this. People were saying this was like Chernobyl, that this was the worst ecological disaster in American history. And when you see a cloud like that and you don't understand why they did it, and it looks so ominous because of density differences in the atmosphere, I get it. I get it. I get it. But comparing this to Chernobyl is not just wrong, it's misleading. And I think social media has a propensity to want things to be really terrible, to want the government or the EPA to be very wrong. I don't know why. The world's a dumpster fire these days. But if you compare something to Chernobyl, it's immediately in an argument like comparing someone to Hitler. It is you're ratcheting the conversation temperature all the way up, and then people are going to start getting things wrong. So because I'm, a Chernobyl student, and because many of you have tagged me about this, we should get this right. If we want to have any kind of nuanced discussion about environmentalism, regulation, and stuff like that, we can't make comparisons like this. I mean, first of all, in Chernobyl, we're talking about an explosion that had enough force to lift a space shuttle. We're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of uranium. The fire at Chernobyl raged for 7 days. It went on to contaminate hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of Europe, not 10 miles of a small town. And I'm not discounting that, but if you're going to compare it, the scale is they're not even on the same chart. It'd have to be a logarithmic scale. Furthermore, 30 people were killed instantly at Chernobyl. And for the contaminants of Chernobyl, something like the fission fuel and the fission products will remain radioactive for decades, hundreds of years. Now, I understand that you could say the same thing about these chemical contaminants in Ohio, but that's simply not the case. For example, vinyl chloride, which is what you'll see everyone talking about, which is used to make things like PVC, which stands for polyvinyl chloride, is a VOC, volatile organic carbon. Volatile, meaning that it tends to break down. And other things that volatile means, but it tends to break down. In the environment, vinyl chloride will break down with sunlight alone in a couple of days. And if there's material still on the ground, if there's material soaked into the ground, it will tend to evaporate away. So the lingering contaminants here in Ohio will be identifiable by the air concentrations measured with your equipment. They will dissipate. Thanks for covering this, Kyle. I live in Ohio, says Twinge. And just if there's, I'm guessing there's more people than usual watching this stream. So if you want to know why I may have a slight interest in Chernobyl, it's because I was there. I did a lot of on the ground. I was there for a week. I was filming 8 hours a day. I was learning about it. This is not that. Just so we're setting our scales correctly. Kalisha Anderson enjoying the memes on the community page. Now, when I see things like this, it reminds me of something like the TMI disaster, the 3 Mile Island disaster, where now and this is where I believe the conspiracy and stuff um, comes in. How much were you paid for this mitigation? Says Jason J. Nothing. We're getting there. We're getting there. Don't worry. We'll get there. You don't have to immediately claim I'm a paid actor. Why would I? Anyway. So, immediately after a disaster that is invisible, mostly, to the public, and you have a distrustful, um, many times validly distrustful public, people will then start claiming that everything else, or they'll start claiming many things that are now associated with this disaster, whether that be generalized health symptoms, headache, nausea, animals dying, etc., etc. And this is dangerous. This is dangerous. And once the media starts covering it in this way, giving anyone who has a headache or feels nauseous or smells something in the air a microphone, then it gives everyone else the impression that everybody is getting sick. Okay. The problem with that kind of approach, of course, is that the things that would happen anyway, like feeling sick, generalized, when I say generalized symptoms, I mean symptoms that would have happened on their own and happen all the time to everybody, regardless of what's around them. You start, you do an A equals B correlation, and you say, well, it's that gas in the air that made me sick. That's what humans do. Humans are amazing at making patterns like that. This differs greatly, as another point of comparison, for something that happened decades ago that truly could have been called something like a industrial Chernobyl or a chemical Chernobyl. In India, an accident occurred at a plant that you see here that was tasked with making insecticides. Same story you always hear: lack of regulation, pushing the boundaries, doing things unsafe, money, etc., etc. And enough gas leaked out that by the morning, 4,000 people were dead. Now, I bring up this extreme example to compare it to what happened in Ohio, only because of the language being used. We have to get our scale right here. This released pesticides, insecticides into the environment. It was 2 times denser than air, so it clung to the ground and it spread out. And because it was lower to the ground, insidiously, it affected people who were shorter, like children. So where does Ohio fit into all of this? And chat, I know you have a lot of questions, and we'll get to everything specifically once I'm kind of done with the main overview here. So we have a spectrum of what we're looking at. What happens now? Well, I can tell you that as of right now, the EPA is continuing to monitor air concentration quality in all of the homes in this area. I think there's about a little over 400. There has not been a single recorded actionable contamination in any home. Neither has there been in any of the locations where they're doing static monitoring. So right now, and again, don't trust me, don't trust the government, don't trust whoever, Just trust the instrumentation, which is set up to detect a level that is dangerous. Right now, there has not been a single recorded actionable level of those airborne chemicals at the site. And that's not likely to get worse. It's a gas, or the main constituent was released as gas, that will dissipate in the atmosphere, break down under sunlight, and become something else. And again, remember, chat, we were talking about concentration. I know it sounds, you have a knee-jerk reaction to it. I get it. But there has to be some concentration at which something is harmless, right? If I drink a bottle of this stuff, yeah, that's bad. But what if it dissipated in the atmosphere to the point where in the volume of air in your hand there was 1 or 2 atoms? Do you know what I mean? Two ends of the extreme, but we do science to find where is the safe level for a human, right? And right now, we haven't found that dangerous level anywhere, and it's not likely to stick around. And because of that, it's very unlikely that anyone's going to get an acute dose chronically. So the health effects you hear of these chemicals, like vinyl chloride, of liver damage, possible cancers, etc., are not things that happen like that in something that dissipates to such a low concentration. It happens over years, you know, chemical plant worker exposure kind of thing, right? But you will hear more about this as this monitoring is continued by the EPA, because again, it's hard for the public, especially people who live in Ohio, because concentration is also, it changes odor detection. So the concentration of vinyl chloride that you can smell is 1/3 of the dangerous level, right? So you can be very far away from dangerous and still smell it, right? So that gives people who live in the area a warped picture of what officials are saying, right? Oh, it's safe. Go back to your homes. We don't detect anything in your houses. We'll pay for you to stay at a hotel. And you go to your house and you still smell something weird in the air. That's unsettling. They said they could smell it 10 miles away. 1/3 of what they claim is dangerous, says Larry Lynch. Larry, why are we being conspiratorial here? That's what I'm getting at. For someone like Larry, who says, oh, well, what they consider dangerous. Well, then there is some level that isn't dangerous, right? And that's what the instrumentation detects. Counterfactual to the cover-up idea, what you are saying, Larry, is that they are detecting levels that are dangerous, and no one is telling anybody. No one's leaking anything, no one's disobeying orders, no one's doing any of these things. That's what a conspiracy is. And I'm not saying that's impossible. It's just one of the least likely options, right? Now, there is something to be said about, lax regulations that led to this derailment in the first place. Not regulating how often the trains are checked for safety, how and where and what chemicals get transported when and how often. The capitalistic impulse that drives us to send VOCs this way around the country all the time. It's necessary to make the things that we buy. There's a lot to be said for those things. I get it. We move millions of individual radioactive sources around the country every year. But nuclear sources are so heavily regulated. I was talking to one of an operator of a nuclear power plant, like the CEO, and what he said I really like. In the nuclear industry, when they're transporting nuclear materials, nuclear waste, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they know where their material is down to the neutron. Ohio's Japan now? No, it is not. So in the coming days, in the coming weeks, you'll hear more about this. You'll hear people saying they got sick, much like happened at 3 Mile Island, even though the concentrations in both areas were not enough to produce effects as we understand them biologically. And there will be battles over, okay, pay for my lost time at work, pay for you upended my life, etc., etc. But in this kind of situation, I would say, according to what we see on the ground, leaning most heavily on the fact that there hasn't been any dangerous concentrations found in any home or in the air at all, I would say the response to this and the PR is what is going to be the main health effects of this situation. In 3 Mile Island, that's what the final report also found. That stress, loss of work, loss of income, stress-related ailments, that was the main health effect. It had nothing to do with radiation at all. So I suspect something like that could happen or is happening and is definitely happening on social media. Now, that's not to say they have the Department of Wildlife, I believe, in Ohio, did say that there was a couple thousand fish that they found dead already. That happened in the first couple of days. It's not happening anymore. And how you deal with that is what they already did where people are concerned, which is change what streams and waterways are being used in water treatment plants, alter your treatment plans such that you can filter out those chemicals with certain processes like reverse osmosis, etc., flocculation. We don't have to get into it. That's what my thesis is about. So it seems to me that this disaster has hit at an inopportune time in the media cycle where it feeds into this apocalyptic narrative where comparing it to something like Chernobyl is misleading and incorrect. And I feel for everyone who is in the area getting a text saying everyone within a mile should evacuate. That's terrifying. And remember, before they did the controlled burn, this whole thing could have exploded. And then that evacuation order would have been completely valid. And people have to go home and spend money, and they're terrified, and they're gonna wash everything they own, and they're gonna throw out certain stuff that they like, and the kids' school was canceled for a whole week. That is incredibly disruptive, but I believe that all of that will likely be the main effect of this. And people in the chat saying, I'm a paid actor for saying something like that. I'm just looking at that. That's it. In contrast to a place that is grossly contaminated, like Chernobyl, like Pripyat, you bring one of these to Pripyat, and it is beeping the entire time. Everywhere. You bring it near some stuff, it goes off the charts, or not. Places that look like pristine forest, beautiful forests, things clicking everywhere. To compare it to something like that is misleading. So I feel for everyone who was affected. Incredibly uprooting, disruptive, scary. Thankfully, I do not believe this is anywhere near to a mini-Chernobyl. That's... Whoa. I have a monkey on my back. There you are. Chat, you're the monkey on my back. Don't be tempted, Kyle, to go to Ohio to prove a scientific fact. No, I don't need to. That's what people are on the ground are there for. Plus, I'm positive those air detection equipment are many, many thousands of dollars. Thank you for talking about this coverage, Kyle. I know you're not a paid actor to do this. That's why I became a facility member and part of the family. He says, cool dude. 5. I appreciate that. Look, if this was a Mini-Chernobyl, or this was an Exxon Valdez or something like that, I would say it. But I view this as an opportunity to fact-check something that has been supercharged by scary images that people don't know why they're happening, don't know for how long, etc., etc. That's what good science communication is about. What are they testing for? I missed that part. They are testing for the concentration of certain chemicals in the air, soil, and water. Nothing actionable detected in the air. It has been detected in the waterways. They diverted certain waterways that were upstream from certain communities and wastewater treatment plants, changed the treatment program at those plants to adjust for the chemicals, and the chemicals that would leach into the ground will evaporate. Where are you getting the readings of those instruments then? EPA is putting out a couple documents. I'll put them in the pinned comment afterwards if you want to look at stuff. Hey Kyle, you're still alive, I see. Says one for the team. I told you last week. Toff with the 10. Appreciate it. What compounds are left over in the smoke after the burn? I don't know. Can you let us know the concentrations detected? Yes. So why you do a controlled burn in the first place if you're just joining us, chat? Is because the resultant from the combustion process, chemically speaking, is less bad than what it is before. The Paul, thank you for the 4. Zombie, love your vids, Kyle. Very informative and helpful. Hey, I'm just trying. I know I'm a silly science guy most of the time, but we need to do good science communication when we see it, and I think that's something that all of you want as well, right? Hearts out to those in East Palestine. Thanks, Kyle, for bringing this to my attention. It's a zombie virus with the 10. Yeah, like I said, there is no doubt that the people who had to evacuate went through a really harrowing and scary situation. But scary is that's a different thing than being harmed directly, right? Which we haven't seen. Kyle, love the show. I'm developing a spaceship CCG collectible card game. Would you like to make flavor text for it? Sure. But Kyle, what about the chickens? Says Jacob Bryant. So, it's hard to look up things while we're doing this, chat. People were saying that their chickens nearby, in their like home chickens in their home roosts, basically dropped dead. And I can't speak to that. I don't know. I would imagine it can be a combination of things that were going to happen anyway, and it's very possible, and we know this is true, that some animals have different susceptibility to different concentrations of things, just like humans are susceptible to radiation more so than a tardigrade. Built different. Tardigrades are built different, chat. So I can't speak to the chickens. Because you would have to get, if we were having a fact-based discussion, chat, we would have to go and autopsy the chickens and get tissue samples. Just a second. Just a second, chat. We're still looking up specifics. This is still, let me see here. Does anyone know the wind speed or humidity levels would make a huge difference? Says Ryan. Well, Ryan, the thing is, if the concentrations are already below actionable level, as it disperses, it's only going to get less concentrated, and so over time, it will disperse to the point of harmlessness. The difference for something like a Chernobyl is that when a cloud of fission products disperses over the environment, even a tiny concentration of it can make something grossly contaminated for decades. See, that's the difference. Vinyl chloride degrades in sunlight in a couple of days. Cesium-137 stays dangerous for 30 years. Equal volumes of both, completely different, right? David, with a 1999, I work in healthcare, 10 miles from the accident. I work with people from East Palestine. The general concern is not that of acute threat to life, it's lifelong concern of increased cancer risk and birth defects. Good point, David. So with TMI, it was the same thing. 3 Mile Island is the same thing. What about 20 years from now? And I saw this, people were being quoted in articles like, you know, we'll see what happens to me 20 years from now. I don't know why I did that accent. That's not what Ohio sounds like. But again, this isn't a chronic dose. This was a, if anything, below detectable level acute dose. And so to be harmed by something like chemical contamination, you would need to have a body burden, a concentration in your body for a long amount of time. And that's not what we will see, because the burn off is going to dissipate. The rest of it is going to be remediated if it's still in the soil or in the water, and it's not going to be a constant source of that contamination for the people there. Again, different than something like radiation that can give you those long-term effects acutely, like that. Yeah. So they didn't get an acute dose, and they're not going to get a long-term dose. So without those two doses, how do you get a long-term effect, right? And again, like I said, there are valid arguments about lack of regulation, government response, the response of the governor, etc., etc. I'm not speaking to any of those. What I will say is, like in 3 Mile Island, if the government personnel or whoever giving the press conferences was science literate, the public would not be as scared in either case, in any of these cases, if you properly knew how to convey risk, you know. Recently got a piece of Trinitite and plan to eventually build my own cloud chamber. If successful, would you like one built for yourself, says Boomy Gordo with the 20. I tried building one by myself. We actually have a video on that. I don't know if Trinitite is going to be radioactive enough for you, Gordy, though. You can buy cloud sources that are much more radioactive. Kyle running for president confirmed? No, but I would do like a public health official thing if I was an expert, which I'm not. Hey, I criticize too, especially with the COVID response. When I feel like I could have done a better information campaign, I shouldn't feel that as a citizen. I should feel like, yeah, you got that under control. But I didn't. And I criticized it. Yeah, so it looks like I know, I'm not looking at you, chat. Yeah, so they haven't found anything above 0.1 part per million. The tricky thing is that, like I said, you can smell some of these chemicals at a third of a point. Is it a third? Or is that even less than that? Yeah, a third of a part per million. So yeah, they haven't detected anything above 1 ppm for the area in the air. Now it is possible. Just joined up about 17 miles away. Now it is likely, and people are reporting this, that something like acid rain could be produced or is being produced. Some of these chemicals, acid rain comes with is when the water in clouds becomes slightly acidic. That's all it is. Most water is almost near balanced pH, which is 7, which is a measurement of the relative concentration of hydroxide and hydrogen ions in water in a solution. But when something like nitrogen oxide gets into water, the chemistry alone makes that water more acidic. And when it falls, that more acidic water can start to degrade objects on the ground. And I think one of the chemicals, let me just check. Yeah, low levels of nitrogen dioxide at the crash site. And not nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide into the air. This could happen, yes. But again, that will eventually precipitate out, you know? EPA claimed 9/11 dust was safe. I don't believe that. See, in this case, that's what you worry about with very small concentrations. You worry about particulate from burning things more so a lot of the time, like dust. Okay, so a lot of people want me to look into. Because I don't know off the top of my head the reaction products. I have a government report right in front of me, chat. It's 50 pages. Why are we doing this live, chat? Why are we doing this live? We don't have to do it. Well, it's only 50 pages. Here, chat, just a second. Wait. How would I do this? Yeah, let's try this. This is that. No. Bam. (1986). April 1986, the same month and year that Chernobyl exploded. Yeah. Ohioan here, you saw the report of over 3,000 dead fish in the local streams, tributaries, dead animals up to 10 miles away from it. It is concerning. Yeah, yes, but that is for those fish, that was an acute, all-at-once dose to the river or the stream. That will also dissipate to a concentration that's less lethal. So when you look through a government report, something like this, Chad, the good thing about the government, if there is any good things that you would say, is that they're pretty on the nose with their titles and everything like that. So what you're asking about is the combustion of vinyl chloride. So for something like this, we'd look at the list of tables. Table 3, thermal decomposition of PVC and its toxicity of the combustion products. So 13... Page 13. Chat, we're doing our own research live. Now again, this is only really useful if you know what the hell these numbers mean. And I haven't read this before. So apparatus supplies approximately constant concentration of decomposition products to a flowing airstream to mice. Let's see what the table says. Why are we doing this? It's fine. Let's just see if there is a table with the results here. LD 50 toxicity members comparing. Okay, so see, vinyl chloride, max concentration, blood samples from dead animals. Rats were exposed for a long time. Lethalities include... Okay, so what we're looking at is vinyl chloride. Just vinyl chloride, what we're actually talking about. Look, chat, we're doing our own research. Max concentration for at time of death. What killed these rats? 8,000 ppm. Now, we haven't talked about the concentration. Stop fanboying about Chernobyl, says Jason J. I just like his work recently. I just think he's just a great artist. I mean, I'm a stan, you know? I'm a Stanislav. So when we were talking about not detecting vinyl chloride in the air at concentrations above 0.1 ppm, this says that in an animal model, a lethal concentration, or lethal to half of the animals that experienced it, was 8,000. Which, Chad, I think you can do the math on. It is at least 8,000 times the concentration that was being monitored at this site. That, when it's 3 orders of magnitude more, you would say that it is negligible. Now let's see. Was there... Here we go. Toxicity of the decomposition products in the presence and absence of water. That is... So decomposition products, you're burning off the vinyl chloride. It goes into, I'm guessing, fluorine and others. I don't know what these... Oh, non-flaming and flaming. There we go. Guessing this is ppm without water. 10,000 and 7,000. So again, if I'm reading this correctly, which I think I am, this is milligrams per liter. It's not what we're looking for. We want things in terms of mean ppm. We're talking about finding levels in the area that are many, many, many thousands of times below what our animal models would say would start to be lethal, or lethal for 50% of people who encountered it. Cool. Great. Why are you doing that to me? Why don't they just come out and give the facts that yes, a spill on this magnitude is going to affect the environment. Don't worry, we're committed to cleaning it up, says Jackknife TV with the 10. Well, it does appear they are committed to remediation and cleaning it up. And yeah, the spill did happen. What else did the company do? The company donated $1.2 million to 1,000 families to cover expenses that they incurred. The EPA has completed more than 400 in-home tests and haven't shown detections of any concentrations known to cause health risk. The company donated $220,000 to the fire department, $25,000 to the Red Cross to help with air purifiers and anything else the public might need, even if they don't actually need them. And we're awaiting results on drinking water supply, water system, etc., etc. Again, I personally wouldn't be as worried about that given the volatile nature of volatile organic chemicals, hydrocarbons. Where'd you get your $1.2 million donation figure? This is a press release for Norfolk Southern, the train operator. In a press release stated today, the company said it has donated $1.2 million to 1,000 families to cover expenses. I've only seen 25,000. That was to the Ohio Red Cross to set up a shelter at a high school and give 100 air purifiers. So the company's on the line. Archer with the 10. A citation needed button would be awesome. Well, all I have to say is that vinyl chloride is used to make PVC, and guess where most of your water in your house runs through? Says Jackknife TV. Well, once PVC is created, it's not in the volatile stage. It's not a gas. It's a mostly inert thing that's not going to chemically interact with your water. So that's not the same thing. So, chat, I mean, if we spent a whole hour talking about this. I know that there's probably a significant percentage of you who think that I'm wrong, or think that I'm being, I'm Chernobyl standing. Don't believe me, don't believe officials. That's not my goal. I hope in approaching this from a scientific perspective, how we talked about, looking at concentrations, looking at where and what is being measured when, looking at how these chemicals actually interact with the environment. Dakota, I saw some of your comments. I hope that at least this approach is interesting to you. If you still disagree with me or what I think the general, what I think the gist of this story is, that's fine. But if you got any kinds of tools or different ideas on how to look at things or not, that's all I want to do. I'm not here to convince you, and especially if you're in an infected area, I don't blame you if you don't believe me. It's scary. I get it. I do. That's all. Do you like Phil Collins? I usually only watch Dr. Disrespect, but this is good. Yeah. Dr. D had no influence on, the facility or use of transitions or anything like that. Any train derailment is scary. So, and again, just to put kind of a cap on this could have been a lot worse. And it would have been easy to demonstrate that it was bad. Like, people directly harmed by this. Okay, so a lot of I saw this like the Bhopal incident or Chernobyl again. Mr. Sobe has been saying something a lot of people have been saying. Your definition of conspiracy is ideological. Conspiracy from a neutral position only means an agreement that excludes public knowledge. There are real conspiracies. You've even talked about some. Yes, that is true. There are real conspiracies. I give you that. But what the Fine. When I talk about what a conspiracy is, I mean the colloquial understanding of the conspiratorial mindset. And it's that mindset that leads people down weird pathways. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a cabal of rich dudes who said, like, yes, let's crash the train and tell no one how dangerous it is. But what I'm saying is that it is extremely unlikely that that is the case, and insisting that it's as likely as other options, that's what's conspiratorial to me. And I was kind of rambling a little bit there, but I do appreciate your clarification. And there was just a nitric acid spill in Tucson. Yeah, I said nitric. It could be nitric. The LD50 of polyvinyl chloride is inversely proportional to its velocity. Well, most things are, right? I haven't looked into the Megantix disaster in 2013. I haven't. I'm not a train spill aficionado. Let's see. Because you wanted me to check. I'm on the Norfolk website at the moment, Jay. See how hard this is to find, huh? It's kind of like a proof of concept. That's not what that is. Hey, we were going to talk about space balloons, but no. Newsroom. News releases. There you go. There you go. You should look at some of Plainly Difficult videos. He covers a lot of the disasters like you. I highly recommend his channel, says Dakota Martin. I'm aware of Plainly Difficult. I don't follow Plainly Difficult because he covers almost the exact same topics that I do on Half-Life Histories, and I don't want to cross-pollinate. I don't want to sound like him. I believe that we do our documentaries in a much more... the pacing is different, the framing and the emotion is different. So I think we cover the exact same things, but I'm going to keep doing things my way. And I don't want to just look at what he's doing and then it osmoses into my brain. 400 ppm is not terrible, not great. Where are you getting that? The India thing was 1,000,000 times worse. Yes. This is the weirdest episode of Family Guy I've ever watched. That doesn't even make sense to me. What about the other chemicals and compounds on the train not being discussed? Civilians with drones have turned up more answers, says Chief Seven Bears. I'm not aware of what you're talking about. But I don't see how drone reconnaissance by civilians would be able to detect different chemicals. And again, I know I'm usually this silly science man. But a lot of you specifically asked me to talk about this because of the rapid devolution of this topic into comparing it to something like Chernobyl. Only $1 million? It's an insult, says Francis Ty. It's your opinion. You know, the town is very small. Only had to evacuate within a mile. I don't know how many, people dollars, per capita that spreads out to. But for something that didn't actually physically harm anyone, I don't know. Per capita, that could be a lot of money depending on who's included in coverage of that. I would say, again, that the mental health aspect of it is the main effect and is just as real. How far is the infection zone? There is no infection zone. This isn't TLOU. There's about 4,000 people in the area. So, Chad, I mean, I'm not going to do it off the top of my head because I'm going to get it wrong. Not very much if you give one to every single person in the city. So, chat, I don't think... How can I have your hairline, master? Says Rick. Rick, calm down. The evacuation order was for 2 miles, but engineers should have said it should have been 16. They didn't want to cause a panic. Again, when you say things like that, it does immediately make it sound like that there was some sort of cover-up or not telling the public something. But again, like burning off chemicals seems like a bad idea. But if you have an indication that the potential health effects of this thing might be negligible, then having 16 miles of people all evacuate could be a much more dangerous thing. This happened at 3 Mile Island. Press release, there's chemicals that fission products released, fission products released in the air, mandatory evacuation, everybody panicked. They specifically focused on pregnant women and small children. That had all of them panicking, everyone evacuated, and it was, there's a quote by a man saying it was like, it was hell on earth. It was chaos. And that ended up being affecting the people much, much more than the radiation. Again, you can do the calculation, like checking, okay, well, what's the LD50, the lowest, the lethal dose for 50% of the population that receives it? What is the LD50 ppm, parts per million, of something like vinyl chloride, etc., etc.? And we find that it's thousands of times more than what we measured, so we can feel like we're okay. Similarly, at 3 Mile Island, they measured the ambient radiation increase from the venting of the gases at 3 Mile Island and found that statistically, over the course of their lives, it's likely that less than one person would develop cancer. Statistically, less than a single person. The numbers worked out where it's a 50-50 chance that nothing would happen to anyone. You know, so. Could this start a zombie apocalypse? No. Will this affect our ability to reproduce? No. Thanks for being here, Zero. I live 3 miles from EPA National Guard. A convoy was outside my house as well. A lot of people here are spreading false information about it, says Delito Blue. Yeah, and I think everyone in the area, you can sign up for voluntary air quality monitoring inside of your home. 50-50 chance, I don't like those odds, says Quad Sans. 50-50 chance of having 0 effects from a disaster at all is great. In the 3 Mile Island example, especially when there's an entire documentary on YouTube saying that tens of thousands of people were harmed. Clearly not the case. Folks keep saying it's carcinogenic. Does carcinogenic have a measurement like ppm? So when we're looking at ppm, we're looking at LD50, like lethality from giving it to animal models over a short period of time. That's an acute dose. That's what would have happened if, you know, say this thing exploded and it wasn't controlled burn and it got in your face or something. Acute dose. I don't know what the concentration for carcinogenicity is. But given that the measured dose was below an actionable level, and when we say actionable level, we don't mean death. We mean possible health effect. When it's 10,000 times lower than even the most minor health effects, you consider the health effects negligible. It'd be different. It'd be different in a place like Fukushima or whatever, where you can measure ambient radiation levels, and they are approaching, or they do approach, levels that would be harmful for people. That's different. But we're so far away from what we're measuring in these chemicals that I take the tone that I am taking. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have done this live stream if it was more up in the air, because I'm not an expert. I mean, I guess I'm a science communication expert, I suppose. And I approach this in the way that I would cover it if it was still my job. But if it was more up in the air, like there's unaccounted for chemicals, a lot of people were exposed, there's high levels in places, we don't know what the long-term health effect is going to be, I wouldn't have touched this, because I'm not an expert. But when you have a very clear trend, it's easier to summarize in the way that I've been summarizing it. Thank you, Eric, for the 22. Are you going to do a video about this? No, I don't think so. I think this is going to be the video for it. So, chat. What chemicals were burned in the derailment? So the chemicals themselves, just a couple people asked now. So I also want to just read the most recent update from the EPA, which was yesterday. Community air monitoring will continue 24 hours a day. As of yesterday, 291 homes have been screened. To date, no detections of vinyl chloride or hydrogen chloride were identified for the completed screen homes. There's only 181 homes that remain to be screened. Local schools and libraries screened yesterday. Network of air monitoring throughout the East Palestine area did not detect anything above the actionable level. So before and after the situation. And like I said, it's going to be difficult because you will, or I would, and it's natural to associate a smell or a headache or something with stuff in the air with dangerous chemicals. But again, odor threshold is much lower than dangerous threshold. And general symptoms like headache, like shortness of breath, not shortness of breath, headache, nausea, fatigue, those kind of things can just happen. Cool Lambo, which is a picture of a cool Lambo with an Australian $5. Trains are dangerous. We need to use ground-to-ground rockets instead. Chat, I hope you learned something today. I know I learn whenever I talk to you. You give me an indication of what you're actually concerned about. And I know I'm not an expert, but I try my best to communicate accurate and good information with the proper lens of risk management, etc., etc. My heart goes out to everyone who was scared out of their minds or are still scared. I understand, and I hope that life returns to normal quickly. Chat, if you want to continue this conversation, you can always comment below the video. You can join the facility, patreon.com/Kyle Hill. You can join our little community in here, behind the blast doors. You can like this video to know whenever we talk about the next controversial thing that many of you will want to be controversial about, that I don't think is that controversial, but coming up next at the facility, speaking about totally not controversial things, we're going to have a Last of Us science video. They added some new science to it, and we got to do some new science. And this Friday, we will also be continuing on the gaming streams. If you want to play video games and science at the same time, what could be better? We even went overtime because I wanted to talk to you the most that I could. You are far too responsible for 2023, says French Onion. Someone has to be. If you have further questions and comments, comment below the video after we're live. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope I assuaged some of your fears. I think that's the right word, if you had them. I think long term, this will be a scary thing that happened, but not an ecological or humanitarian disaster. Have a wonderful rest of your day. No matter where I see you, next live stream in the gaming center, next video, next Half-Life history, which I'm filming this week. Till then, be nice to each other, because this is all we got. I'll see you soon.